Hello and welcome to this list of the top 10 best James Spader performances. You know, for an actor with over 40 years of experience in everything from made-for TV family dramas like Cocaine, One Man's Seduction, to hit blockbusters like Avengers Age of Ultron, a legal drama show, Boston Legal with William Shatner, as well as simple art house classics like Sex, Lies, and Videotape. I feel James Spader's been strangely underappreciated. At least he was until he started in The Blacklist, a massively popular television show that ran for as many as 10 seasons. And ever since, he seems to have done very little. Well, I don't know where he is, but I want him to come out of semi-retirement and come back because his films are amazing.
Right. Was it fun playing the bad guy? It's always fun playing the bad guy. I really hated you in the film.
Yes, James Spader is very well known for villainous roles, but he also told an interviewer in 1987 that he likes to be cast against type and that he likes directors that cast him against type, that he likes characters that raise a lot of questions, questions that take an entire shoot to answer. You can tell this in his range, in the movies he selects, in the roles he chooses. Throughout his career, there are unfailingly interesting choices, dazzling, unique. Well, let's have a look at some of them.
From the director of the original Friday the 13th comes a new Ticket to Terror.
At number 10, we start with one of James Spader's patented villainous roles in The New Kids from 1985, directed by the Master of Thrills, who directed the original Friday the 13th, Sean S. Cunningham. Now, I can't say this movie is entirely successful, certainly not as good as Friday the 13th, but it is kind of a blast, and one major reason is you've got James Spader. The plot of this movie involves Lori Loughlin, who of course is Full House's Rebecca, and her brother moving to a small town in Florida after their parents pass away. And they're just trying to live their lives, but unfortunately they're tormented by a kind of gang led by James Spader, playing the villainous Dutra.
And in New York, Barry Moss introduced me to this young actor, James Spader. And he was just off the charts strange. Now, I don't mean it as a person, but he had this persona of being strange and intense. And he was a young actor, and I think that he was studying in New York at the time. And he came in and he read some things, just in a casting session, and he'd look me in the eyes, and it was so unnerving. And he just tickled me. He was having such a good time being a bad guy. He just loved it, and we loved him. I mean, he really made it crackle because he was literally so scary. And I don't know that we'd ever seen anything quite like that, especially in a young person. And I think it elevated the film in a lot of ways.
There's this scene where he has a bet going who can pop Lori Loughlin's cherry first. Well, she, of course, is not very happy to do so and rejects him rather harshly. And then he says, looking directly into the camera, after she says, "You're crazy? You want crazy? Oh, I'll show you crazy."
You want crazy? Well, I'll show you crazy.
And this line so potent is in the trailer twice, go figure. Look, if you want to see a teenage psychopath played perfectly, pitch perfectly, look no further than this movie. James Spader is just unbelievable in this role and also kind of hilarious. He's wearing a different cowboy shirt in every scene. At the same time, there's something really creepy about him. You completely believe that he would control this small town, this coke-fueled, crazy psychopath holding an entire school in fear. It's a very memorable performance so early into Spader's career, and for me, one of his best performances.
Don't look so scared.
Spader was a very important piece of casting because he was going to be the antagonist.
What do you want me to do? I'll do it. Resign today. Promise never to see Charlotte again. Just tell me what to do.
And there were different ways of doing it. You could do with someone who had more brutish, who's more brutish, who as they transformed, they would be more conventionally alpha. And we kind of like the idea that for this man who was sort of so toxic, that it wouldn't necessarily be his physicality, but a kind of toxic, more his poisons are inflamed by the beast in him.
You vindictive son of a bitch. The best thing for the firm is me. I'm the best thing this firm has, and you fucking know it. This is fucking ribbon. What are you, crazy?
At number 9, we have Wolf from 1994, and trust me, this is a very strange movie because it's an office drama that's also a werewolf movie. You see, you've got Jack Nicholson playing the editor-in-chief of a big publishing house. Now, he intends to keep it high standing, but the publishing house is taken over by Christopher Plummer, and he wants to fire Jack Nicholson. Now, Jack Nicholson has a protege of a kind, played by James Spader. And James Spader, sometimes known for playing backstabbing yuppies in office environments, plays exactly that role here. There's just a bit of a twist, which is that Jack Nicholson is also turning into a werewolf. And eventually he bites Spader, and Spader turns into one as well. And that's where the movie gets so eerie, so creepy. There's this scene where James Spader is first showing his werewolf side, and he is so creepy. I mean, this scene could have been completely ludicrous, completely ridiculous. It's only James Spader being so pitch perfect at being quietly sinister, flashing those eyes of his, that scene works and that this movie works. I mean, imagine playing opposite Jack Nicholson and kind of stealing the show, but honestly, Spader did it. He showed himself worthy, and this is a fun, unique, interesting movie, well worth checking out.
Robert Downey Jr., Jamie Gertz, James Spader.
Check me out. I'm going to make a serious comeback.
Great! Less Than Zero.
At number 8, we have Less Than Zero, based on the novel by Bret Easton Ellis. Now, at the time, and still really, people find this movie a bit too preachy, but it does have a wonderful performance by Robert Downey Jr. You see, Robert Downey Jr. was stuck in LA while his best friend went away. Now, when he returns, he finds Robert Downey Jr. taken over by the horrific coke-fueled club scene of LA, where he also is involved with a horrific drug dealer played by James Spader called Rip. Now, this is where the movie really is most glorious, because Rip is the most pitch-perfect portrayal of a drug dealer ever put on the silver screen. I lived in Amsterdam for a couple of years, especially at a time when the streets weren't as clean, in my opinion, and I had dealings with some people like this slick, eerie, semi-friendly, and the best thing about the writing here is that he isn't even wrong. Robert Downey Jr. just owes him money, and all he wants is that money. And in fact, he says outright that he's basically a lost cause, and you know what? He's right. You won't find a drug dealer played better, even though it's a small role in a bit of a preachy movie. It's worth watching just to see Robert Downey Jr. very well playing a drug addict, no surprise there really, and James Spader just knocking it out of the park as his drug dealer.
A film by Philip Haas. The music of chance.
At number 7, we have The Music of Chance from 1993. Now, this is adapted from a novel by Paul Auster, and this movie is only for those who dare walk the strange, puzzling paths of postmodern literature. The bare plot outline is very strange and hard to follow in a way. Well, it's simple, but crazy. You've got Mandy Patinkin, who's an ex-fireman. He picks up James Spader playing a professional gambler. Spader thinks he can make them some money. Unfortunately, they lose in a huge poker game and are sort of imprisoned and then forced to build a wall based on stones that belong to a castle, that belong to Cromwell. The only other character really is M. Emmett Walsh playing sort of the foreman, keeping them under control. But what's really interesting about this movie is how unrecognizable James Spader is. I mean, his hair is black, he has all this facial hair, but it's more in the mannerisms. He has this heavy accent. he's completely believable, but also completely different from any way you have ever seen him before. And really, this is a movie to watch multiple times and really think about. And it's only because of the committed performances from the lead actors that you can get so much out of it. Kudos to Spader and Potemkin.
You have 1 minute to decide the rest of your life.
At number 6, I've put 2 Days in the Valley from 1996. People believe this is sort of a Pulp Fiction ripoff. It has some similarities. It's also just really cool in ways. Well, one actress won a Razzie Award for worst performance in it. It isn't all great, but James Spader certainly is very noteworthy. He plays an assassin and he has this pocket watch, stopwatch, and he gives his victims exactly 1 minute to plead for their life. And if you compare this to the last movie where Spader was kind of playing a dirty scoundrel, here he's a classy killer. There's something eerie and precise and meticulous and almost surgeon-like about the way he kills people. And even though it's, again, a rather small role, James Spader always steals the show. It's so often the case in these movies that it's worth watching just for James Spader's turn. And this is another case right there in this chaotic romp of a movie that really is quite a fun watch. So enjoy it if you seek it out.
I bought 50 burgers, you gave me 44. Now what's the problem? Do I get my money back or do I go to the manager?
Yo, buddy, listen, I'd like to get my hamburgers.
Will you just leave Mr. Stair alone? He's trying to report a robbery here.
At number 5, I have White Palace from 1990. Now, this is the only time in Spader's career, I've watched his entire filmography, where he is outdone by the person playing opposite him, because Susan Sarandon is so good in this movie, it hurts. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The basic plot here is that James Spader's fiancé has passed away, and he's deeply mournful, but you've got his friend, played by Jason Alexander, famous from Seinfeld, of course, saying that he's pitying himself. They try to set them up with somebody, but instead he meets a working class woman at the local burger joint, White Palace, obviously meant to be White Castle, but they couldn't get the rights. Well, this is a relationship almost doomed to failure. They're just too different. How is she going to be accepted by his social circle? Well, the reality is that she basically isn't, and it's a very sad, dramatic movie. A role that James Spader said was taking its toll on him emotionally and was very difficult to walk away from. But I think it's really an underrated, very dramatic, very interesting, very thoughtful, romantic film coming from Hollywood. I love to watch it, and I hope you do too.
Listen, I'm getting really bored with this conversation, all right, Dwayne? You know, if you want your little piece of low-grade ass, fine, take it, you know. But if you do, you're not going to have a friend.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if you want to make the choice, go ahead and make it, all right? I personally wouldn't trash a friendship over it, but hey, I'm old-fashioned.
At number 4, we've got Pretty in Pink from 1986. Now, I have to admit, I've never been a huge fan of John Hughes' 80s teen movies. And this is one that he only wrote. He didn't even direct himself. Still, when I rewatch this, I just skip to James Spader scenes. I don't know if this is a particularly great movie, but my God, is James Spader good and memorable and just iconic in this. Oh my God. Okay, you've got James Spader playing this rich kid, and he can have anybody he wants, except Molly Ringwald, who doesn't want him. So at one point, he goes up to her, and he goes, you know, I don't see how you're any different from any of the other girls in this school. And she goes, well, I have taste. And he just goes, you're a bitch. And he's so slimy, so detestable. In fact, the director of casting revealed in an interview that James Spader was so detestable, so slimy, so horrific, that he didn't want to cast him. It was a director who told him, no, that's good. You want to hate him.
And I remember James Spader coming in and smoking a cigarette, which is so impossible to even think about anybody doing that now. But even then, to do that was a little risky. And he was just so obnoxious, but he was completely in character because he's actually a lovely person, very nice and not at all like the character that he plays. But he just had this real sneer about him you know, and the smoke and blowing of the smoke, and I think he even dropped the cigarette on the floor and you know, stamped it out and just left.
He just was so believable that even I, you know, I was casting the movie and I went, gee, I hate this guy, you know, and I wasn't able to translate that into, but that's good for the movie, because he was so despicable. And that's where John and I separated, because John was able to have the experience of knowing, well, that only means it's better for the picture.
Spader, I introduced myself and I said I was a fan of his because he had done a lot of teen movies where he was just a total jerk. And I was like, and he was a great villain, you know. And he said, yeah, I figure I got a lock on this teenage asshole thing. And I mean, some of my favorite moments in the movie are Jimmy Spader. You know, when he, after a fight, he spits on the floor of the school. I was like, oh, you're awful, you know.
Okay. Hey, Blaine.
There was one night, I don't know why, I remember just a big party scene where I go up, James Spader is up sitting on the bed, he does some gesture, he kind of goes, like this really crude gesture that I just thought was brilliant.
I loved when Spader confronts Molly, how come you won't go out with me? You know, and he's just so slimy and does that, you're a bitch.
You're a bitch.
Which on TNT is like, you're a witch, which just doesn't work as well as you're a bitch. I mean, it makes him sound really gay.
You know, I think you ought to see a doctor, because that condition of yours could get a lot worse.
People say that Jimmy does this whole slimy thing well, and I guess he does. He has a certain glee about him that I think is what makes it so funny. He just has this twinkle that and he's sort of back a little bit.
And you know what? People don't even hate him because he's also incredibly attractive. I mean, just oozing charisma and sex appeal in this movie. This is really where he started out as a sex symbol, and you completely understand why. What a legendary turn so early into his career. A movie, again, worth watching just for Mr. James Spader.
I've never had a job before, but I can assure you that I am very excited about this opportunity.
All I need is a typist who can answer the phone.
You have reached the office of Mr. Edward Gray.
It's very dull work.
At number 3, we have Secretary from 2002. Now, James Spader never really fit in the archetypical lead man type of role. And maybe he wasn't even the best for that, but here is a performance where few could deny that he was just perfect. In fact, Roger Ebert said there might be better actors, but there's no actor who's better suited to this role than James Spader, and he was so right. This is a movie about a BDSM relationship between a lawyer and his secretary, but it's not at all like something like 50 Shades of Grey. In fact, there's a deep pain to the character of the secretary played by Maggie Gyllenhaal, and it's treated very respectfully. It develops slowly, quite awkwardly, because there's something very neurotic about James Spader's characters. This is just two people coming together and finding each other in a way that seems almost meant to be.
I think he's horrified as well. And I think that drives him. That, I don't know actually whether it's horror so much as he's extremely conflicted. Yes, I think there is. I think they see reflections of themselves in the other person, and sometimes that's enormously compelling and exhilarating and arousing.
Secretary, here's why I took the film, is because I read it, and it, you know, the trappings to that film were very provocative and different and unfamiliar to me. But those are just the trappings. In its heart, it was just the loveliest love story. I thought it was just a lovely love story, and it was so moving to me. And I thought, what a great juxtaposition that is.
But that still progresses very slowly. It's a wonderful film, just quirky and charming in a way, and about such a difficult subject that only great actors and a great script could have made come to life in such a memorable way. It's one of James Spader's best performances, and honestly, just a great movie. Check it out.
Crash.
My number 2 choice is Crash from 1996, the David Cronenberg movie, not to be confused with the Oscar bait movie that's famously one of the very worst films to ever win Best Picture. No, this is the controversial movie Crash. So controversial that there's a book called The Crash Controversy. What makes this movie so controversial? Well, it is deeply, deeply disturbing. It is based on a novel by J.G. Ballard, which has to be one of the most disturbing books ever written. Certainly, I know nothing that disturbed me more, but also nothing that really fascinated me more. And then they adapted this into a film. Well, they chose David Cronenberg, who was known, of course, for body horror. But here the horror is just purely psychological. It's something that seeps under the skin. And in fact, the novel disturbed even Cronenberg so much that he apparently had to stop reading it for a bit. At the same time, the movie, as J.G. Ballard himself says, actually goes even further than the novel, if you can believe it.
I mean, the film is about sex and car crashes. That's what it's about. The sexuality of these characters in this film, interspersed with car crashes, and how they meld the two. So, when you're seeing these people's lives, you're seeing their lives through the lens of their sexuality.
In Crash, James Spader plays opposite Deborah Unger. They're a married couple, but they're sick of life. They're trying to find something that gives their life some meaning, including having sex with complete strangers and then relating these tales to each other. They ultimately find it in the crashed car. Yes, this is a movie about people getting sexually turned on by car crashes. It's incredibly strange, but it has its own logic. The crashed car is about the convergence of violence and sexuality, which are the key engines of entertainment culture. Thus, the crash car becomes a symbol of man's unconscious desire and his technological artifacts. Yes, I know a lot about it because I read books like Death and Desire in Car Crash Culture, or simply the essay collection Car Crash Culture. There was a time when car crashes were very important engines for popular culture. They involved a lot of celebrity deaths, for instance, famously. Nowadays it seems almost quaint in a way, but certainly at the time it was incredibly meaningful. And so this movie and the book it's based on are very much a product of their time that fascinated me to no end. At one point, this is really strange to say, but I was so obsessed with these novels that I got a photographer the idea to shoot pictures of me in and around crashed cars. And so we did. Yeah, I was really obsessed with this movie. And the blame is really on James Spader, who is just extraordinary. According to director David Cronenberg in his director's commentary, he called up James Spader, and Spader said that he wanted to know which women were in it, because I get to fuck them all, right? He said. Well, at that point, Cronenberg knew he found the right man, because Spader wasn't afraid to shock a little bit and to play devilishly with words and ideas. And so he did in this wonderful, and again, I keep using the word, deeply disturbing movie. And by the way, don't think there's anything even remotely sexual or titillating about the sex in this movie. It's cold, it's clinical, it's just disturbing, yes. Well, enjoy it if you dare to watch it.
Okay, I'm recording. Tell me your name.
Anne Bishop Mulaney.
Sex, Lies, and Videotape. Winner, Best Picture, Best Actor, Cannes Film Festival.
At number 1, I have Sex, Lies, and Videotape. And yeah, there are kind of a lot of movies about James Spader having sex. Who knows why? Well, he's a sex symbol, so that could be one reason. But it's also just apparently the kind of roles and stories that he's interested in because they're about human beings' deepest desires. Well, they come to the fore in this movie, which did very well at the film festival circuit. It's very well edited by Steven Soderbergh, very well written and directed by him. Fascinating film. I once showed it to my dad, and he said it's just a bunch of people talking that you can't take your eyes off. It's so interesting, and it truly is. You've got James Spader, who is the friend of Peter Gallagher from A Different Time. Now, Peter Gallagher has a wife, And she, played by Andy McDowell, is kind of bored with life, doesn't really know what to do, is sort of depressed and out of it, has a therapist, but she's not making any progress. But this stranger, played by Spader, who seems to have been living in his car, turns her life around. He's the kind of guy who doesn't seem to understand himself, but does understand and see through other people. It's a very tricky performance, especially when it is revealed that James Spader cannot get a hard on, but he gets turned on by filming people, women, discussing their sex life. Yes, again, a very tricky topic, but one just played excellently. Special shout out also to the soundtrack, which works incredibly well with the film. It's a fascinating feature, and one I would invite everybody to watch, and a very tricky lead performance from James Spader that I feel almost no other actor could have pulled off. Well, I hope I've introduced you to some great movies you haven't watched or seen yet. They're all worth a viewing, I think, especially the later ones. So go out and discover James Spader.